Welcome everyone to the Wednesday edition of our Packers News live chat. Alongside Ryan Wood, I am Olivia Reiner. The Packers hit the field today, gearing up for their big game this weekend against the Indianapolis Colts. We'll take a look at the health of the Packers roster heading into this weekend, plus we'll also preview the matchup in just a moment. However, as always, before we begin, if you are over on Facebook, Periscope, and YouTube, leave us a question down in the chat. Ryan and I want to hear from you. We'll get to some of your thoughts toward the end of our conversation today. This past week against the Jacksonville Jaguars, when Packers fans saw wide receiver Davante Adams leave the game a little bit early with an ankle injury, everyone got a little bit nervous. However, he returned and he ultimately scored the game-winning touchdown. However, today in practice, he only was participating in a limited capacity. How likely is it that Adams is healthy and active this weekend against the Colts?
Yeah, so Davante Adams wouldn't guarantee that he's going to play Sunday, but he said that everything that they're doing this week is with the idea that he will play. So it's a lot easier for him to gut through an ankle than it is a hamstring with those soft tissue muscles. The medical staff is very conservative with getting those guys back on the field. You don't want to re-aggravate it. An ankle, it's not a whole lot worse that you can do. It's kind of a pain management thing. That's why Davante Adams was able to return to the game Sunday against the Jacksonville Jaguars, where he wasn't able to in week 2 because he had a soft tissue against the Detroit Lions. I thought it was interesting, Olivia, that Davante Adams said that, one, he's not limited in terms of he can jump off both feet, off both legs, if he's got to go high point a ball, the way that you saw him in the end zone against the Jaguars, go up and take the elevator to get that touchdown. But if you know anything about Davante Adams, his release game is what makes him special. And he's, in his words, very aggressive with his feet. The lateral cuts, he really digs his feet into the ground. And to do that effectively, you've got to have healthy ankles. When your ankle is tender, which was Davante Adams' word for how it feels, it does impact you. It limits you. So you've got Davante Adams, who is, even if he does play, I think it's likely that he plays. He's going to be impacted in some way by that ankle. And then you've got Allen Lazard, who's activated on Tuesday, practiced today, still coming off that core muscle surgery. He hasn't played since week 3, and you can imagine, as conservative this medical staff has been, the Packers are likely to be very cautious with him getting back on the field. So Davante Adams and Allen Lazard should play, likely going to play, not guaranteed, but should play. What we don't know is just how much they will play, how big of a role they'll be. And I think that, sometimes you hear that it's gamesmanship. I think that's a legitimate thing this week, just how big their role is going to be.
In other injury news, cornerbacks Jaire Alexander and Kevin King are finally starting to turn the corner. King practiced today for the first time in a full capacity in months as he's been dealing with a quad injury. Jaire Alexander practiced in a limited capacity for the first time as he's been dealing with a concussion over the last couple of weeks. This is a big week for the Packers secondary as they're going up a Colts offense that has some very talented receivers in T.Y. Hilton and Michael Pittman Jr. How important is it that King and Alexander are healthy and ready to go on Sunday?
It's huge. And, maybe not as big against the Jacksonville Jaguars and Jake Luton, but against Phillip Rivers, who, oh, by the way, this Packers defense just lost to when he was with the Chargers last year. So they know Phillip Rivers at 39 years old can still sling it. He had a 108.3 passer rating in that game last year. Phillip Rivers can be very much like this at this point in his career. Frank Wright, when I asked him today about the regression of age, and Phillip Rivers said that he's physically the same guy. That might be very complimentary of Phillip Rivers. He is 39, and at this point in your career, you do lose something off that arm. But the Packers, they're not going to take him lightly. So to get both of those corners back, potentially, to have Jaire Alexander get through the concussion protocol, which he's not yet, but back on the field today, to have Kevin King finally a full participant after not playing since week 4. It's been a minute that he's been on the injury report. To have those guys back, and Olivia, the way that this defense works with its perimeter coverage working in so much concert with that defensive front, that pass rush, it's going to make that pass rush more lethal as well. It's going to bolster that up, and we haven't seen that be very consistent. Certainly not in terms of depth like we did last year. I think a big part of that, Kevin King hasn't played in a while. This coverage has not been what it has been with fully healthy corners either.
Let's look ahead to this weekend's game against the Colts. It is iron versus iron. The Packers' number 3 scoring offense versus the Colts' number 4 scoring defense. However, critics of the Packers offense may argue, hey, they haven't played many teams and won against many teams in the top half of the league. The only two top half teams that they've won against are the 49ers, and the other one was the Saints. And you could argue the 49ers, okay, that was a JV team. However, to play some devil's advocate here, the Colts haven't fared that much better against really strong offenses. They've only won against two top half offenses in the league in the Vikings and the Titans. Who has the upper hand in this matchup this weekend?
We're going to find that out. I don't know that we really know yet. I think this is a big week for both teams, and there's talk today about being a measuring stick type game. I think for the Packers offense, and I also think equally for the Colts defense against this offense, we're going to find that out. But if history is any indicator, the one thing we know about this Colts defense is it has a lot of speed. It is blessed with a lot of speed, especially in that defensive front. And we know that history being an indicator, the Packers offense has struggled blocking up quick defensive fronts. You go to Tampa Bay, Matt LaFleur said that this Colts defensive front is similar to what they saw in San Francisco last year. They haven't blocked that up well. And until they do, I don't know that you can expect that's going to happen. So it's a tough matchup for this Packers offense because of the speed that they're going to face, especially in that defensive front. With that said, I don't know that this Colts defense, which is number one in total defense in yardage, it's top 5 in scoring. I don't know that it's the Bucs. I don't know that it actually is the 49ers last year. Those defenses are rare. This Colts defense is very, very good. I don't know. We're going to see Sunday. I think it's going to be really fascinating. It's like Frank Reich said. You've got a fully loaded offense versus a fully loaded defense. That's the matchup to watch. It's good on good. It's going to be fascinating to see.
Packers fans are still trying to scrub Phillip Rivers' last appearance against the Packers back in 2019 away from their memory. At the time last year, Rivers was at the helm of the lowly 5-11 2019 Chargers, and the Chargers put a whooping on the Packers 26-11 last season. What can Packers fans expect to see from Rivers this time around in a different offense?
Yeah, it's a great question. When they last year, his release was so quick, and that really neutralized the Packers' defense, their pass rush. The Smiths last year, both clicking on all cylinders, they got taken out of the game a little bit by that quick release. So I think that it starts there. Phillip Rivers, it's all up here. The way he diagnoses the field, how quickly he gets through his progressions, and then how quickly he gets rid of the football can really take away your pass rush. And so the downfield throws, the arm strength, it might not be what it's always been, but that mind is still really powerful weapon for him. And so it's going to be a challenge this week to get after him.
Let's flip it over to Facebook, Periscope, and YouTube for all of your lovely questions. It is so good to see everyone here. Thanks for joining us tonight. Let's start with our friend Josh over on Facebook. Josh asks, is cornerback Kevin King a buyer's beware for his next contract because of injury concerns? Kevin King becomes a free agent in 2021. He is part of what was a long list of 2021 free agents. However, the Packers already locked up defensive lineman Kenny Clark and left tackle David Bakhtiari and extended their contracts. Where does Kevin King fit into the Packers' future right now, given the fact that he has been battling injuries throughout his entire career?
Coming into this season, the final year of his contract, the one thing everybody said for Kevin King to maximize his open market value was that he had to stay on the field, and he hasn't. So there's no question that that's going to have some impact because, yes, he's got a long, extensive injury history that was for an abbreviated period just last year, kind of went away. He played 15 to 16 games, very productive. That's not a surprise. When Kevin King's been on the field, he's a very productive corner. He's a playmaking corner. He's got that size. He's got that length. He's got that speed, fluidity. A lot of guys that big can't move like he does. And when he's healthy, it all kind of comes up with it combines to make a pretty solid corner, which there's just not enough of in this league. Problem is he just can't stay on the field. So I do think that in some ways, you combine Kevin King not answering that medical this year with the fact that the COVID-19 is going to reduce salary caps likely to $175 million throughout the league. That's going to have impact on his market value. It should make him easier to retain for the Packers. I got to imagine that, yes, the Packers are going to want to retain him because when he's on the field, he's been productive for them. But Is it a concern? Yeah. I think everyone knows that this is a guy who's very talented, very productive and healthy, but just doesn't have a history of staying healthy.
Thank you, Josh, for your question. We appreciate it. Let's take a question from Andrew over on Facebook. Andrew asks, does anyone else think that outside linebacker Rashawn Gary should be on the field more than outside linebacker Preston Smith? Gary had a huge sack in the Jaguars' last possession of the game on Sunday that ultimately was a game-saving stop for the defense. To be fair, so did Preston Smith. Their sacks came in consecutive plays. However, we saw a lot of production from Gary this past week. He had a quarterback hit, he had a tackle for loss, had a couple of tackles as well. Where is his stock trending right now?
Rashawn Gary's stock's going up. Preston Smith, if you compare it to last year, it's going down, but it's been like this. Like we've seen the regression early in the season, and then he hasn't really picked it up from there. He just kind of stayed there. So, I certainly it could be getting to that point. I think the Packers want to have all three of them with Darius Smith on the field quite a bit anyway. I don't know that Preston Smith's snaps necessarily need to be reduced as Rashawn Gary's are increased. It's not an either or. It can be a both. With that said, Rashawn Gary, young guy, second year, he's flashed a little bit. I think he's a guy that the Packers defense would like to see on the field more.
Thank you, Andrew, for your question. Spumster has a transactional question that is important to highlight. They want to know who will the Packers release with the activation of wide receiver Allen Lazard. The Packers currently do not have to release anyone because they have two players on COVID-19 reserve, inside linebacker Chris Barnes and running back A.J. Dillon. Those two players do not count against the active 53-man roster. However, there is a possibility that either or both of them will be healthy enough to play this week. Inside linebacker Chris Barnes was present at practice today. However, he did not participate. The Packers are going to have to make some moves in order to make room for those COVID-19 reserve players. How do they go about trying to figure out who they're going to have to cut?
Well, we'll see. I mean, it's like trying to guess who they're going to release can be like trying to catch all the water out of a drinking fountain. You're going to miss some. So, we'll have to see who they. But I think that to your point, Olivia, you're right on the fact that if Chris Barnes and A.J. Dillon stay on the COVID-19 reserve list, they can activate and they can have Allen Lazard. It won't be a problem.
Thanks, Mumster, as always, for your questions. Let's take a question here from Blake over on Facebook. Blake asks, does the Packers defense have the talent to keep ascending, or are they what they are at this point in the season? If you look at the Packers right now, they're actually their defense, I believe in total defense, they're what, like number 10 or number 9? They're up there right now. However, to our Packers fans in our Packers bubble, you see the Packers play every single week. This Packers defense has nowhere near been on the level of the Packers offense. How much better does this team need to be in order for the team to keep ascending?
Better, not markedly better. The big thing on defense is they've given up way fewer yards than last year. It's just there's not as many big plays. They got to make, and they got big time playmakers on this defense too. I mean, they got Darius Smith, they've got Preston Smith, they've got Kenny Clark, they've got Jair Alexander on the outside. They've got big time playmakers. It's just the name recognition has been greater so far than the actual big plays made on the field. Really, outside of Darius Smith. Darius Smith's got 8 sacks. He's doing what he does. They've got to make more plays. If you see that, this has been a stingier defense than last year. And that's a good thing. Giving up fewer yards is a good thing. They've given up more points because they haven't made the same amount of plays. And so it just all comes with that. It starts with the pass rush, having more depth. A pass rush isn't supposed to be a one-man band. A good pass rush is supposed to come at you in waves. And depth is critical to being able to have a consistent presence on the quarterback. They haven't had that depth. And if you have that consistent productivity in the pass rush, that's where you generate turnovers. You get the offense out of their comfort zone. You get them off their rhythm, off timing. The offenses have just been too comfortable this season against this Packers defense, but they have been stingier. So there's a baseline here that they can build on. It's just a matter if they will or not.
Thank you, Blake, for your question and for joining us tonight. Tyler over on Facebook wants to know, have we talked about center Corey Linsley yet? We have not discussed Linsley today. I'm assuming you're referring to the fact that Linsley, in addition to players like cornerback Kevin King, is a free agent in 2021. Where does Lindsley fit into the Packers' plans in their free agency in 2021?
Well, behind David Bakhtiari and Kenny Clark, we learned that, right? So, and not a surprise because he's a center. So if you're looking at guys that are really talented players that just because of positional fit and cap ramifications they have to move on from, I think Corey Linsley's been a pretty popular name. I think he understands the situation that nothing's guaranteed with this team for next year. So he's got to put that on film, and he has been. Corey Linsley's a very quality center. He's a solid starting center in this league. Sometimes teams have to make difficult decisions, and that could be one of them. Corey Linsley's doing everything that, unlike Kevin King, haven't been able to stay on the field. Corey Linsley's been doing everything that he needs to do to set himself up well for free agency.
Thank you, Tyler, for your question. Over on Facebook, Jason wants to know, do you think this offense will be different without, or I suppose with, wide receiver Allen Lazard and his eventual return, whether it is this weekend or next weekend? How is this offense different when wide receiver Allen Lazard is healthy and on the field?
You need depth everywhere, right? So his presence just makes it a deeper receiving core, which this receiving core has lacked depth. It's got more depth than last year, which is a historically low bar to have more depth than last year. Only one 500-yard receiver in 2019. But it's still not very deep at receiver. And it's especially not deep when you take away Robert Tonyan at tight end. You take away Jamal Williams at running back, Aaron Jones at running back. Those are some of your best receiving threats, and they're not receivers. So it's Davante Adams. It's sometimes Marquez Valdes-Scantling. And that's it at receiver. You want to be able to go in 11 personnel, three wide receivers on the field. You got to have three wide receivers that you can put on the field. Allen Lazard gives them that.
Thanks, Jason, for your question. John over on YouTube says that the Colts offensive line is going to be a huge problem for the Packers. How do they stop running back Jonathan Taylor for running for over 200 yards? 200 yards would be quite a nightmare. The Packers certainly would like to avoid that. The offensive line of the Colts has been very strong. They've only allowed 8 sacks on Phillip Rivers all season. However, when you look at what Taylor is able to do on the ground, how did the Packers' run defense, which has struggled mightily all season, attack their run game?
That's a great question. It's not just Jonathan Taylor. It might not even be mostly Jonathan Taylor. Nyheim Hines is very, very similar in style, not in productivity, but in style as an Aaron Jones, this guy that's a dual threat and kind of a real slashing type runner that can be a receiving threat out of the backfield as well. But it all starts with that Colts offensive line, which is one of, if not the best in the NFL. And this is the Packers defensive line that has Kenny Clark. And on the interior, that's pretty much it. Montravius Adams didn't practice today. They just don't have the consistency behind Kenny Clark on this interior. And they don't have the consistency on the edge either. It's Darius Smith and Preston Smith and Rashawn Gary have had their moments, but it hasn't been consistent. So it's a tough matchup. As much as we are going to be talking this week about the Packers offense versus the Colts defense, that Colts offensive line against this Packers defensive front very well may be what decides the game.
Thank you, John, for your question. We'll keep it on YouTube. Solar over on YouTube. Solar Hulk. That's a fun name. I wonder, is that your real name? They say they know that it doesn't affect this season, however, but will wide receiver Devin Funches' contract next season, how is that going to shape out? Is it going to be what they signed him for this year, or are they going to have to negotiate a new one? Devin Funches' contract from this season tolls to next season because he opted out due to coronavirus concerns. His cap hit in 2021 is supposed to be over $2 million, which is quite a chunk of change considering the fact that the Packers are going to be looking to shed a little bit of money anywhere they can, given the fact that the minimum cap is going to be around $175 million. How likely is it that they either cut Funches or renegotiate a deal with him?
Yeah, it's possible. This is a team that might be looking for cap casualties. I tend to think that at the end of the day, it depends on where Devin Funches is after missing a year from football. But if he's what they signed him to be, they'll keep him on the roster. And the reason for that is this receiving core needs all the depth it can get. And at the end of the day, $2 million. If he is a guy that can factor into their 11 personnel and be one of their 3 receivers on the field, that's not crazy money for them to spend. So a big question is going to be what is he able to do after a year away? But I would think that if he's what they thought they were getting in their evaluation of him come this spring, $2 million is just fine. They need depth at receiver.
Thank you, Solar Hulk, for your question. That is going to do it for us tonight, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. I will be back later in the week with some of our other Packers News reporters to take more of your questions and to look ahead to this weekend's game against the Colts. So make sure you come back here and chat with us. For Ryan Wood, I'm Olivia Reiner. We'll see you next time.